Well, hey everyone, it's Nate here with episode 286 of The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. And I've got to admit, I've been holding on to this interview for several weeks now, and dear Lord, I've been wanting to share it because it's such a great conversation with an extremely interesting and extraordinarily funny guest, Mr. Eerie Von. Now, many of you are already familiar with Eerie Von, and if you are, well, it's possible you may have just fainted in excitement for the type of vinyl record conversation we're going to have today. For those of you unaware, Eerie grew up with, went to school with, hung around with, and even played with Misfits in the late 70s and early 80s, at which point he remained close friends with Glenn Danzig, joined Samhain, stayed through all of their albums, and deep into about half a dozen Danzig albums as well. Eerie has had an amazing front row seat to American punk rock history and was present at and likely the midwife for the birth of horror punk. And today, Eerie is an incredibly open book, sharing stories and details of what that time was like from his vantage point. Eerie has even written a book, Misery Obscura, a book compiling photographs and stories from his days with Misfits, Samhain and Danzig. You can get Misery Obscura anywhere books are sold, and today, Eerie and I are diving deep into the vinyl and merch world of Samhain and Misfits, discussing his recollection of the records, the Fiend Club, printing shirts, selling records, his memories of the rare pressings, the process of fulfillment, his memories and funny stories of his time with Glenn, Jerry, Doyle, and more. Now, Eerie and I spoke for quite a long time, and he gave such great information, was such a funny dude, we just kept recording past our scheduled time. I've put the entire interview end to end up at patreon.com/vinyl guide. I'm always putting extended episodes and extra content up there for our show patrons. Plus, they've had this conversation since last week. So if you enjoy our podcast and what we do here at the Vinyl Guide and want to help support us, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/vinyl guide. And up there, you get to hear the rest of the show. And because our conversation with Eerie was so extensive, I'm splitting it up into two parts. Today, you're going to hear Eerie cover his early days, from Rosemary's Babies, meeting the Misfits in high school, going to early shows, getting their records, photographing the band, being there to watch the breakup and disintegration of Misfits, the formation of Samhain, and more. And coming up next in episode 287, we'll cover the recording and pressing of Initium, Unholy Passion, November Coming Fire, and on into Eerie's time in Danzig and more. And look, I think we're going to absolutely have to have Eerie on again. He's so full of great information. He's had such a huge career, and unfortunately, we've just got a limited amount of time to cover it all. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I think you'll be looking forward to the next installment, episode 287. So the action here is to subscribe or follow the Vinyl Guide podcast. Now, hit that follow button on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever podcast app you're using, and you'll be alerted immediately when the second part of this interview is available. Plus, you can go through our back catalog of episodes. And if you're a Misfits fan, well, we do have another episode 142, The Rare and Collectible Records of the Misfits, featuring Frederick, the co-creator of the On Earth as It Is in Hell discography guides. Frederick's knowledge and research on Misfits vinyl is really outstanding. His books are the authoritative books on the subject, and a huge special thanks to Frederick for all his info, knowledge, and guidance to myself and the Misfits community. So that's all, everyone. Let's start our conversation with Mr. Eerie Von. So, I don't know if you know much about our podcast here, but the Vinyl Guide, we've got a legion of record nerds that listens to this podcast. And
so I should talk down a little bit.
Yeah. I think a lot of them like humiliation.
Well, yeah, that's part of it too, but you try not to make it so apparent. That's a lot easier to do in person, than it is on through the radio or the computer or whatever you want to call it. So Okay, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll work it, and you always have the option to throw up the way. That's way too record nerdy for me. But I suspect you were
Oh,
there.
please! If I don't know what's going on, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
know?
Good. So, look, you were. We'll go through various phases of your career because you've got this amazing history, and there's a lot of questions that a lot of record collectors and a lot of record nerds really want to know. So, again, thank you for making the time. Were you raised with a lot of music around the house? Did you have a lot of records when you were young?
Yeah. Yeah. My dad was a big music fan, so he always had the radio on to like oldies stations and stuff, and he still bought records. It was like 8 tracks back then. There was it's like a cassette, but it's like putting a piece of bread into a toaster. So you people out there don't know what I'm talking about. That's all.
I remember those.
Yeah. So there was a lot of music that my parents used to go to cocktail parties. That's what they did in the '60s, and everybody would bring some records with them, and you had to write your name on the record so you would know whose record was whose when you went home. It's just like bringing chairs. You try not to leave your records, but you used to always leave your chairs. So yeah. Anyway, a lot of music growing up as a kid. So by the time I heard the Misfits, that was probably 79. 78, 79. Yeah, I was already starting to get into punk rock. So
And what were the bands that you were identifying with at that time?
Right at that time, I remember Doyle making me an 8-track. Like you could actually, burn record on 8 tracks, like with Necros and Black Flag, Dead Kennedys, and stuff. I like the Necros, never liked Black Flag or Kennedys much. I like Dead Kennedys a little bit, but I like the Necros, and I like that whole sort of Midwesty kind of thing, and then got into Discord and the whole Minor Threat deal, and then stayed on the East Coast and went up the coast and liked a lot of Boston bands like Jerry's Kids and the FUs and Gangrene, and and also like the Bad Brains, a couple of local bands in New York.
Were you going to shows at this point?
Oh yeah. But I went as soon as I could, and then all through high school used to go every weekend. Whoever had a car, I would just go. I'm like, come on, let's go see this band. And even if I didn't like them, I would say, come on, we'll have a great time. At least you get into the city,
Now, you and Doyle and Jerry, you guys all lived in the same neighborhood? How close were you geographically?
No, they were on one side of town. I was on the other side of town. We were like split by like highways. Like the closest highway to me, what was the closest highway to me? Now I have to think about it. It might have been Route 80, and they were right around Route 46, which was just in the opposite direction. So it wasn't really that far. Like by car, it's like 5 minutes, So, but if you had to walk, it's a pretty good walk.
So you guys met at school. What was do you recall what you bonded over?
Oh, we had to bond. They forced you together, stuff like that. It wasn't like, just like, okay, this is your lunch table. These are the other 8 idiots you got to eat lunch with every day, or 7. There's like 4 on each side. And you're forced to like eat lunch face to face with this total stranger, So it was just like you had to get, and I was like, okay. My good friend Jerry, who was a musician and an artist and a total nut job, sat right next to me. Then we had this guy across the way who was totally disgusting, ate with his mouth open. We couldn't stand him. He was a pig. And then there might have been a girl if she had enough nerve, but girls usually all sat by themselves. And then Doyle was right across from me, and we both had a good sense of humor. So I think that's probably why we became friends, just being stupid. And we like the same kind of stuff, like same kind of TV shows like Underdog and Bullwinkle and, that kind of shit, the Munsters, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I can't honestly remember. And I think we might have had some classes together. It's hard to remember in middle school. That's like 7th and 8th grade for us.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah, we became friends. It was probably through like comedy or something.
Did you have any artistic ambitions at this point?
Oh, not ambitions. I just did whatever I wanted. I started drawing when I was like 5, and then I kept drawing, and I just so I would paint now and again. But I didn't learn to do T-shirts till high school, but we did a version, but it didn't have any photo emotion. It was just like you had to make a mask sort of out of construction paper or garbage bags or whatever, and then you could pull the paint through and make like a one-tone print. So I started doing that stuff. But yeah, I'd always been so artistic, and so was Doyle. He was always drawing, stuff. Or we were most likely we were in art class together that year, probably.
Okay, were they already playing music at this point?
Oh yeah, so if it was it would have been 77, 78. Yeah, they were already a band. I remember one time, might have been 8th grade, Doyle was came in. He's telling me about the Sex Pistols. There's this band, and he was describing them to me, and he was drawing like little cartoons of them and stuff or whatever on your books, and because we had to cover our books in brown paper, so they left a lot of room for doodling, so we did that. But yeah, and he said, yeah, my brother's in a band, I'm like, oh really, and that was pretty much it. I was like, yeah, that's good. It was pretty much it. I don't remember much more about it, but we didn't get. He didn't give me any of the records till we got to high school, which would have been like 6 months from then, because we graduated in June and we had to go back to school in September. So that still would have been 78 going into 79. So that's when he gave me like Bullet and Horror Business and One Night of Living Dead. And then I gave him a cassette, and he put on Static Age, all that shit. And the MSP sessions, which is, 12 Hits from Hell and stuff that was most of the same material that was on Walk Amongst. So once I heard that stuff, the Static Age was okay, and the mixes were, but I really liked the MSP stuff because it was all spooky and, it was like the Ramones only with like as a horror movie,
Right.
So I love that shit.
Okay. And then, as I understand it, you started photography with the band. Was that kind of your first interaction with the group as a whole?
Yeah, I met Glenn and the drummer Arthur Googie that day when we first took pictures. Otherwise, I played basketball with Jerry and stuff. So yeah, that was the first time. And I don't know if I had met Kenny, their brother. He did all the driving and stuff, and he drove us there that day. But yeah, pretty much at the first time I met Glenn, which if I had known, if I knew then what I know now, I might have said, nah, I don't think so. I don't think I'll go.
Have things got to that level? Is it kind of
not
great with you guys?
It's
right
funny
now?
If you think about it. No, if you think about it, it'd been like, it would have been so easy to avoid all this, If I just would have said no. That's what happened when I was going to join the band. I just decided it was a bad idea at the time, and otherwise, I had to like make up a reason because they didn't really like you had to do what the Misfits wanted to do when they wanted to do it, right. Generally. So it was just like, that's just the way it was, So if you wanted to be friends and stuff, you had to just, if they wanted to play basketball, then you had to play basketball, stuff like that.
Right. Okay. Was there ever a moment where you were looking to join or asked to join the Misfits? Yeah,
they asked me to join once, and I auditioned. We blew through like an hour and a half's worth of shit. And yeah, I got in the band. I was in the band for the weekend, and then on Monday, I said, "Nah, I think I want to just stay with my band. I want to put out my record, this, that, and the other thing." And and I think it was probably not meant to be, because then eventually they were going to get Robo, but I went and practiced with them again right before Robo. They weren't sure if Robo was going to show up, and I think Glenn liked me, which was surprising. As a drummer, because I just went and I cheated on the test, because I knew he was going to ask me certain things, So I go to the guy who showed me, the Misfit beat. I played him the 8-track. I said, "What are they doing here?" He listens for about 10 seconds and goes, "This," plays the beat, and I go, "What about this one?" He goes, "Same thing." So basically all the songs are the same beat at that point in time. So when Glenn said, "Play me a beat," I played him that beat. He went, "Okay." That was awesome.
That's not cheating on a test. That's just coming prepared.
Yeah, exactly. I boned up on the test. I just
It's smart.
I had already I knew all the songs, but see, like I hadn't really been in a band with other people besides the guys I was writing songs with, and we were writing our songs, so I couldn't be making a mistake. See, that was the whole thing.
Right.
And with the Misfits stuff, I was getting cued by Glenn's vocals, because I didn't really know what I was doing, but I played everything way too fast, and I couldn't understand what Glenn was saying, or I couldn't hear him because they played so goddamn loud. And so I screwed up the whole time. Those guys couldn't keep up with me. I was playing too fast. I was into hardcore and stuff, so we were going as fast as we could.
Now at this time,
and,
at this time you were in Rosemary's Babies. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And you had this single Bloodlust, and I can't help but think, because Misfits were in the neighborhood and you knew kind of these guys, was that a bit of a page? Did you kind of follow the path that they were doing of this private press record with inserts? Was that inspired by Misfits?
Oh, well, that was just what everybody was doing. Like everybody's I was listening to, they were all making their own records. Mm-hmm. And the inserts were just like, yeah, you can't understand what we're saying, so also it's a lot cheaper to make a photocopy with the lyrics on them than putting the lyrics on the back of the record. You had to think it would costs were all about everything, And back then, it really didn't cost much more to, if anything, to press colored vinyl, So it was just something no one else was doing at the time. Because colored vinyl had been around forever. Mm-hmm. It was just like a thing at the time, like other bands were doing it. And, so Glenn was just like, press colored vinyl once in a while or whatever. And when I went to do my stuff, he just said, oh, well, I need to go out to the record pressing plant to check out their equipment or whatever. It was the new plant. So why don't you come and you can, order your fucking records and stuff and all that shit. So, yeah, it wasn't expensive or nothing, but it was just like, yeah, I called Glenn and said, I want to make a record. What do I do? Mm-hmm. And then he gave me all the phone numbers. He said, okay, you got to call this guy, after you record, figure out where you're going to record. Once you get your tape, then you got to send it to whoever at the mastering place. We used to use master disc, so it was Howie Ludwig or
yep.
Bob Ludwig, who was Bob, not Howie, and not the other master guy, but yeah, mm-hmm. It was Bob Ludwig back then. So yeah, basically, I was doing whatever anybody else was doing,
Right. So Rosemary's Babies, that was mastered by Bob Ludwig?
Probably.
Oh.
I couldn't tell you. I'm pretty sure. That was a long time ago, man. You got like 1983. Do
you know how many copies were pressed?
Oh yeah, 1,000. I had to pay for them, so I know how many were pressed.
And it says originally hand cut and glued by Eerie Vaughn. So you did also 1,000 sleeves as well?
Yeah, no, I still got like 200 sleeves I ain't done yet. So I put them together once in a while. When people ask me if they can have one or they want to buy one.
Right.
So I still got all this. I still use all exactly the same stuff and everything.
Oh, so you got a stack of the raw records, still a batch of that original 1,000, yeah?
Yeah, they're sitting around here somewhere.
Well,
yeah,
I'm sure you know how collectible those records are.
Yeah, I sell them once in a while. I sell, someone will say, "Hey, do you have any of those?" And I'm like, "I think I do." So I have to look around, and I'm like, "How much is it going for now?" And then I say, "Well, what do you think's fair?" And then they, I sell one or two.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, they tend to go for around between $150, $200. Some of them even higher than that.
Yeah, I think 150 is probably what they're at. Something like that. I don't know. It depends on the collector and if it's
mm-hmm.
overseas or if they're just starting their collection. Then you got to gouge them.
Now, at this time, were you also doing work with Misfits in terms of some of the Fiend Club stuff? Were you involved in any of that, call it the supply chain of Misfits Incorporated at that point?
No, that was mostly Glenn. He lived by himself. He had nothing else to do, So mm-hmm. He just watch movies, listen to records, and make T-shirts and stuff, and answer the mail and stuff in envelopes. And, you'd go in there, there'd be like piles of manila envelopes with T-shirts in them. And then there'd be shirts, or there'd be shirts all over the place, all drying, because I don't think he ever thought about putting them on hangers and like hanging them up so you can still walk around,
Mm-hmm.
So they were all over the bed, all over the floor, everywhere. So if you ordered a T-shirt back then, you might get one that's like full of cat hair or something, you know. It's like, so yeah, he did almost all that stuff. I think he told me, and this sounds like him, so I think he told me that he tried to let some of the guys in the band like cut and glue the sleeves together, but they couldn't do it, but they didn't do it right. And knowing him, when I think about it now, I'm like, yeah, he definitely said that, or he definitely didn't let them do it because they fucked them up,
right,
you know, or whatever. They didn't do it the way I told them to do it, you know, because there's a certain way you got to do, you know, those sleeves. And once you get it down, it's like you're a machine, you know, because you're doing so many.
Right.
And so he must have had his own way to do it, go figure. And, you know, it was going to be this way. So he handled almost all of that. Probably only had help in T-shirts once in a while. I might have helped him once, but it was only, you know, taking the T-shirt off and putting it over there. You know,
well, you know, you've had experience with shirts and you've cut and glued records before, but I guess your level of quality didn't match his expectation.
Oh, I never got a chance to do records. By then, I never seen him do records, but I had seen him. I had gone to printers and things with him, so I saw the layouts of like all this stuff from like Die My Darling. And all the represses he did after that, some on like white vinyl, like he just got the sleeves printed but without color, and he's just like, yeah, these are cool. I'm gonna just. It was also a lot cheaper. He's just gonna make these on white vinyl, you know, and it was gonna be limited edition, something cool for the fans. He you know, he always liked doing that shit.
Right.
But,
so at his house, did he have like boxes of each sort of record, and when a letter would come in and someone would order, you know, a Halloween and a Cough Cool and a T-shirt, he would just go through and just grab one of each and put them in an envelope? Is that kind of how it worked? Or
yeah,
or
same thing I still do. You know, it's just like, okay, where's that? I got to find that. You know, yeah, the records were in the closet or under the bed, you know, and sometimes like he didn't know, like I remember, when was it? It was sometime in the 80s. I think it was before we left for California. So it was like late 80s. Like he just found like a box of Cough Cools in the closet, you know. And I was just like, oh, mine's really fucked up. And we'd be out at like a video arcade or something, and he like would run out of money in like 10 minutes. And I had a job at the time, so he'd be like, you got any money? I'm like, yeah, why am I in a video place or arcade without any money? I'm like, what, you need some? He's like, yeah. I'm like, how much do you want? He's like, then he would ask me what records I needed, you know? Like, he'd be like, you got Halloween? I'm like, yeah, I got it. You got a Purple Maryland? I'm like, no. He goes, okay, you got, you know, whatever he fucking had under the bed. And one time I think he charged me $10 for like a mint pressing of Cough Cool, you know? So I would go, I was just like, okay, well, you owe me $20. And he would be like selling the records for like $7 a piece, you know? And so he'd give me like 3 Halloweens. He's like, I don't have any, this is what I got right now, you know? So yeah, at some point I had like 3 Halloweens and 3 Night of the Living Dead and bunches of everything else, you know? Because I just kept loaning him money, and then I drop him off or whatever. I go into his thing and he'd just say, okay, what do you want? You know, that's how I got my Pink Legacy of Brutality. Suffer.
So throughout the years, you would take those records, of course, and sell them or do whatever to.
Fuck yeah. Yeah. I had no money. I needed to pay rent or fucking keep the lights on or whatever it was. So yeah, I sold them, but that was like a million years ago.
Yeah.
I sold my Pink Legacy. I was like the first one to start the collector craze for like a bunch of money, because I sold my Pink Legacy in like 1980. When did it come out? It came out in 88, right? I think. I'm not sure. I sold it real early on for like $2,000. It was like the first time anybody had sold a record for more than a couple $100.
Wow. And
it's my fault.
Well, what do you think of the collectability of Misfits now? I mean, a bullet single going for, you know, $4,000 or $5,000 or more?
No, it's more than that. There was one like a couple of weeks ago that went for like $15,000 or something crazy.
Oh, Jesus!
And
yeah,
somebody has I saw a thing today. Somebody has a Cough Cool up there for like $18,000. But there's only 500 of those, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the fact that Glenn found a box in the closet, because they come like 25 in a box, I think. I'm not sure. Could be 50. If they're already in the sleeve, it's a little less. But if they're just plain without a sleeve, I think you get 50 in a box. I'm not sure. So that means they didn't sell hardly any because they only pressed like 500 in the first place. So.
Now, was Glenn a collector? Was Glenn a collector? I mean, he seems to have manufactured items that were destined to be collectibles. He chose different vinyl colors, very exclusive kind of artwork. Did he know that that's kind of what he was doing?
We'll be back after these messages.
Well, hey there, you record nerds. Before you drop any dough on eBay or Discogs, make sure to search for your wish list at AudiofileUSA.com. AudiofileUSA.com has over 42,000 titles in stock and only sells excellent and near-mint vinyl records. Many are decades old and still in original shrink wrap. Dig into AudiofileUSA.com, search by artist, genre, even search by record label, and dig for the deals. AudiofileUSA.com is a family-owned and operated business, and all their records are damn gorgeous. That's AudiofileUSA.com, home of the Holy Grails. And next time you're in a record store, ask them for the Groove Washer by name. The Groove Washer is the best vinyl record cleaner out on the market. I use it daily, and my records look and sound their very best. There is no way I'd put any no-name cleaner fluid on my records. Only the best for cleaning, listening, and long-term storage. Groove Washer is safe, proven, and industry recognized. If your local record shop doesn't carry the Groove Washer, then go to groovewasher.com and use discount code VinylGuide10. We much prefer you buy one from a record shop, but if they don't have it, go to groovewasher.com and use discount code VinylGuide10.
Now we return to the program, already in progress.
No limits.
Was Glenn a collector? I mean, he seems to have manufactured items that were destined to be collectibles. He chose different vinyl colors, very exclusive kind of artwork. Did he know that that's kind of what he was doing?
He was doing the same stuff that I do. It's like that's why he and I were friends. Yeah, we were. He was a total collector. He liked cool shit. He liked something that maybe was really hard to get, that he had one, or you know what I mean. It's like, yeah, he definitely liked collector's items. He just liked stuff that was cool. Like, I still say the same thing. If I walked into a place and I saw that hanging on the wall, I'd buy it. That means I don't feel bad selling it to you because I know it's cool, because I'd want it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So he was just like that. So once, and the cool thing was that when he was really got into the colored vinyl, like since then and probably never changed, was really around Samhain when we started with the new pressing place. And he would just take one of the marbled initiums and stick it in a box with a bunch of black ones and send it to a distributor. And then they'd send it to Chicago or who knows where. And some guy thumbing through the fucking records wouldn't know that he was buying a fucking marble copy. He would just, you know, because it didn't have the stickers. It'd say colored vinyl on them. You know what I mean?
Right. It's just a surprise.
Every once in a while. Yeah. Wasn't that fucking awesome? Like every once in a while, he would just stick in a purple Maryland with the other Marylands and then just send it to who knows where. So where would it wind up? In Lansing, Michigan, and Tesco V bought it. You know, something like that.
That's interesting.
I thought that was really awesome.
Yeah. So how often would he do that?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't ask him specifically. Mm-hmm. You know, I would just say something, or we'd be in a regular conversation, and he would just tell me that he would just do stuff like that, just for fun. Just so some collector would like have a really great day at the record store. You know what I mean? It was really cool. There was nothing like going to Toys R Us or one of the places that we had that wasn't in the city to look for new toys, and then finding the Spider-Man with the black costume on a card, you know, that nobody could find, and it was going for $150 right now. You know, stuff like that. You know, the comic book everybody was buying, and you can't find them because they're all sold out. So then we'd go to like 15 different places and try to find this one comic book, you know? And so it was totally cool, you know, and the whole collector thing is because of that, because it's awesome.
Yeah.
You know?
So with Initium, I understand there were 3 black vinyl copies made early on, one for each member. Do you recall that being true?
Oh, I seriously doubt Glenn made one for each member. He probably just got 3 copies because he didn't really, they said, how many test pressings do you want?
Okay.
And he'd be like, I don't know, just send me a couple. So you really only need one. That's why, you listen to it, and then you call them and say, okay, go for it. I'm approving the run, But they didn't do that with the Night of the Living Dead. That's why it came out so bad, because he never heard it till it was already done. And, for some reason, I'm pretty sure that was the reason, because they got fucked up in the mastering. I know that part, but I'm pretty normally you'd have to listen to a test pressing to say, okay, because you're not going to spend for 2,000 records if you didn't hear the test pressing, and I'm pretty sure maybe they just didn't get a test pressing. I could be wrong, but that makes the most sense to me, because then that's the reason. Then they destroyed the plates and never pressed the record again. I mean, that was just a money thing. If they had the money, they probably would have repressed it. Knowing them, they probably would have re-recorded the whole thing, But I don't know about how many copies of the Initium one there was, but yeah, I had one, and I think there was 3 or 4. It was probably 3 if you say there were, and he scratched out the version of Archangel on it because it was the original version, and he didn't want it on there. We re-recorded it or whatever. I can't remember.
Yeah. Did he scratch that out on all 3 copies? Do you know?
Yeah, as far as I know. I mean, maybe he left it on his copy, but my copy was scratched out.
Did he keep all the test pressings himself? Was he kind of...
Oh, yeah, he kept all that shit. Yeah. He even made, he had test pressings for Static Age. Was going to be either an album, or there was going to be a Teenagers from Mars, Static Age, 45. And he did like a mock-up cover and stuff, and he kept the test pressings in those, I think. He's probably still got a couple.
Right.
If he hasn't sold everything, I don't know. But I'm sure he's probably still got some stuff. But it's sitting in a closet somewhere. It's not like in a vault,
Right. Yeah, fair enough. Look, and he sounds like he's got a bit of the collector bug as well. So I doubt he'd be selling that stuff off unless it was absolutely desperate.
Oh no, he's not. He wouldn't be desperate. He'd just be going, really? It'd be like he'd think about it this way. You mean you can get me $20,000 for this record right now? He's already thinking what he can spend that $20,000 on. He's going to be like, oh, there's a great, animation cell I want for that, or there's a mask from a horror movie I want, or there's a prop or whatever. So to him, it's nothing. It's just like it's not like you're just trading. You're getting this free thing for this thing you don't care about anymore. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like I needed a radiator for my Etzel, when I lived back in Florida, and I knew somebody who worked in the Ford plant and could get me an Etzel radiator. It was from 1958, and get me a new one in a box, and it's, new old stock. So I traded him a couple of posters, and I just got my Etzel radiator, which I don't know how much it would have cost me, but it would have cost me a hell of a lot more than a couple of posters.
It's like you guys are able to print money. Like, for example, those Halloween records that he gave you for essentially loaning him $7 or $10. At the time, I imagine they were worth significantly more than that already.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
They were, if they were colored vinyl, maybe, or if it was a limited press. Usually the records that I remember in presses at the time, 45s, 1,000 pressed. If he sold out of 1,000, he'd do another 1,000. I don't remember there being 5,000 or 10,000 of anything. Now, what the 40 EPs back then by punk bands were sold for $3 and $3.50. Our 10-song EP was $3 at Bleecker Bob's. So you had to sell it you could only get $1.50 for it.
Mm-hmm.
So they would sell it for $3. So, but Misfit records always sold, so Glenn could charge a little bit more. Yeah, Halloween and those records, they were probably $7,
okay.
$10. And he would just take a box of record down to one of the stores in New York or a couple of stores and just go and sell some records. And then he'd have money to buy, comic books mostly,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's got a huge comic collection, or he did anyway.
Were there times where, his house was absolutely full of just boxes of records? They'd just been delivered, Night of the Living Dead or whatever?
No. See, 45 boxes, they're nothing. If you press 1,000, that's 5 or 6 boxes. Mm-hmm. And they're only the size of a 7-inch anyway. So they all go in the closet, no problem. They'll go into the bed. even, and, 12-inch boxes is only 25 in a box, and that's only about 4 or 5 inches deep, tall. So those just go into the bed too. So like he had this one big shelf, like an industrial metal shelf that had like 2 sides in the middle of like where the laundry room was. And he'd have all the old uncut sleeves and all the promo posters and just like, whatever they call that paper stuff, ephemera, that kind of shit. The records were just in the closet or, whatever. Yeah. There wasn't stuff all around, not like his house later where it's just like piled up boxes everywhere and just never got around to it, But no, there was because there had to be places to put the collection. So like he still had a bunch of shit displayed, like he had posters on the wall, like the Evil Live poster is just an undead poster that was on the wall. And he just went, hey, that'll be a good cover. Just that was as much thought as it took. Like it's staring him in the face for like 10 years. And he's just like, yeah, I'll just use that.
Was there a lot of mail? Did you see a lot of mail come in from the Fiend Club? Was it, every day? Was it like a sack of mail, or what was your observation around that?
No. This was like, hey, I got to go to the bank and the post office. So I would sometimes just drive him, and he'd get like one of those bins the post office gives you, one of those white bins. But that would be about it, and it wouldn't be like a Miracle on 34th Street where they're bringing in like 50,000 bags of mail. Dumping it on Santa Claus's lap and saying, here you go. No, it was nothing like that. The Fiend Club had maybe 1,000 members in it. That's why he would press up 1,000 records of the first Evil Live 7-inch. He'd make get 1,000 buttons made. And you were on the list. He would just send you, the stuff in the mail. And then you would, get order forms and stuff. And you would in turn buy stuff, buy records, buy T-shirts. It was just a thing. That's what you did to get your band, more popular. And if you did that and more people were talking about you, then you could book a show in another place and do a bigger tour. And, so it was very grassroots, but it wasn't huge. It was like, if you went to play in fucking Ohio, the same 100 kids would go to every show. So then you had to go to Detroit and there'd be another 100 kids from Detroit, maybe 200 if you were lucky. So it was a very small scene, so it was manageable,
Okay. Was Fiend Club and Plan 9, was that pretty much all of Glenn, or how much did the other members of Misfits participate?
Well, Jerry was the only other one, I think, that had any say at all, because back then when the other guys didn't live in Lodi, so like Bobby Steele lived in New York, and Mr. Jim lived in Lodi, Frank Ricotta lived in Lodi, let's see, who was Joey Image, I think, was from New York. So Jerry was the only other one that was really around and would have had any influence on it. But yeah, Glenn lived by himself. He liked to draw and things. I'm pretty sure he was sitting there, by himself scheming up shit like how to make the band cool and, what the band was going to do and, all that. So yeah, I'm pretty sure he was behind almost all that shit.
What's your recollections around the time where Misfits broke up? What were the conversations that were happening? Because I know he was forming Samhain. As I understand it, it was originally going to be a side project, and then it turned into his main thing. But around the time of Misfits breakup, what do you recall the conversations were like?
No, I never heard it was going to be a side project. He told me, he's like, I want to do a new band, because we were talking on the phone like every day. And I was driving in places. We were hanging out. We were going to the movies, so we were talking about stuff like all the time. And he was just to a certain. He told me that they didn't want to rehearse. They didn't want to tour. They just wanted to play on the weekends and fly home so they could go to work, at their dad's place. And when I think about it now, it's like, hey, those guys didn't want to go there. They had to go to work. Like. There was no like missing a day or two. They had responsibility. It was their family company, so they had to do it. Plus that could be a future because the Misfits weren't making any money. There was really no future. So those guys, probably if nothing else had ever happened, would probably, work there for 30, 40 years, retire, own the company, run the company. Mm-hmm. So that was the deal, so they didn't want to do this. They didn't want to do that. This is Glenn telling me, because I didn't talk to either Jerry or Doyle for like 10 years after they broke up. He told me they were getting into Iron Maiden, and they always liked Kiss, and Glenn never liked Kiss. He hated Iron Maiden. They wanted to be more metal, and I think Glenn, somebody just said something that I didn't agree with, that like at the time they wanted this and he wanted that. And I was like, well, from my recollection being there, when he told me that they liked Iron Maiden and they wanted to be, bigger than Kiss and all this stuff. And Glenn was the record that summer when Robo was living with him and Earth AD was going to come out. They just finished it. It was going to come out in like, a couple of months. He was listening to Gangrene from that This Is Boston, Not L.A. Compilation. And he and I were into that, and he was really digging that. So I think that's where the faster thing of Earth AD, that seemed to make sense to me. But then he said that it was way too fast, and that Jerry said that Glenn fell asleep while they were tracking the songs, so he had nothing to say about it, which also seems really weird. But yeah, so it's kind of conflicting, the two things. But I remember it was like, that's all we were listening to, and he would talk about it when he got in the car. That's what we listened to, that gang, those like 8 or so songs on that compilation. But it was also like, it was definitely disagreement in how the band should be, what direction the band should go in, and like how to make the band more popular or whatever, so it can be a money-making thing, and they don't have to have jobs, and they can totally do the band. That's where the difference of opinions were. Like Glenn wanted to probably stay more, like underground, and Jerry and Doyle wanted to be Kiss,
Right.
So
Okay.
that's what I recall. And, that maybe, people now might say like, oh, that's not the way it was, but it might've been that way then, and
Okay.
that's what I recall.
So Samhain his full attention was on that pretty much from day one.
Oh yeah. He told me, he said, I'm telling the guys I'm quitting the band. The last show is going to be in Detroit on Halloween. I don't know why I didn't go. Just something must have been going on in the family that I couldn't go. But he said, that's going to be the last show. When I come back, I want to do the new band. And I was like, okay, have a good show. See you when you get back.
Was the name Samhain already in place, or did that come later?
No, we haven't. I remember specifically coming up with things and saying, why can't it be Glenn Danzig and, like I figured he should be solo, and we'd have the band would be a backing band, like Glenn Danzig and the Archangels is what I suggested. And I thought that would have been really cool. And he goes, no, I want a band. And so that was it. Like I came up with a suggestion or two, and I said, it should be Glenn Danzig and, because we're going to be playing off your name anyway to get bookings and stuff like that. It'll be Glenn from the Misfits. So he's like, no, I want a band. I was like, okay. And then he eventually told me that's what he was going to call it. I can't remember. That part's kind of fuzzy about, like, he might have just said, I want to call the band Samhain. He probably did. But originally he didn't have the skull. He had done artwork of like Michael Myers when he gets stabbed in the eyes and his eyes are bleeding or whatever through the mask or over the mask. And that was going to be like maybe an album cover. But the whole Samhain thing was going to be based on the what did he call? I can't remember what he called it, but it was basically like the demon of Samhain that could be like a shapeshifter. The Shape, that's what he called it. Okay. You know what I mean? And it was all based on that stuff, and then later on it became more religion and shit. But that was what I would call in the beginning, before the skull. It was going to be something like that. And he and I said, well, why don't we just get whoever we can get to play on the record, and then whoever can tour, and it'll be me and you, hanging out here, working on songs together, whatever, doing the band, T-shirts and all that crap. And then we'll get Todd from the Necros to play drums, and we'll get Andy to play guitar maybe. Or how about this guy, they can just fly in, and we could record over the weekend or whatever, So it was going to be like that. But then we were like, yeah, but we thought about that for a while, and then it was just like, no, but how are we going to work on the songs if they're not here to practice with us, So that was like, okay, so that's no good. So we can't do that, because it was a cool idea, because you could just say, hey, we're going to go on tour, learn these songs, and just call up any guitar player friend of yours or whatever, and say, hey, we're going to do 30 days. You want to come out and play guitar, So then it was like, that's when we got Steve, and then we eventually got Pete to play guitar, because Steve lived in Lodi and Pete lived like one town over, or two towns over.
So when you recorded Initium, it was a 3-piece with Glenn on guitar, I imagine. How much freedom did he give to other musicians as they came into the band?
Oh, it depended on the song, really. It's if he had a part that he really wanted, and like if the whole meat of the song was this one particular thing, then it was just like, this is the way it goes. And we're like, okay. Or, I want this here. Usually I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, so I didn't say anything. I'm like, sounds good to me. It was just like, you
got it, boss.
Sing that Samhain song. I was like, sing it, Glenn, sing it. I didn't give a shit. I was just having a great time. It's just like, you want me to play like this? I'm like, I don't even know what notes these are. I was just like reading it off big, like somebody would be behind, holding up letters. A, B, stuff like that. G, So, no, there wasn't like, Glenn would say, he would sit down with the guitar and go, okay, this is how the song goes. And he would just play through it. And Steve would just go, okay, start playing a beat. And if Glenn didn't hate it, he wouldn't say anything. If that was always a good sign. If he didn't say anything, then it was all right. But he'd go, no, that sucks. He was very gentle with his criticism. No, that sucks. Play something else. So he'd play something else, and he'd go like, yeah, that's better, but don't do that there. I hate that. Like, I hate when you do that. Never do that again. So it was really funny. So anytime over the years, as long as I was ever making records with him, if there was something I couldn't play, I'd go like, that's fucked up. I don't even understand this. Why can't I just play this? He's like, no, I don't like that. That's not what I want. That's the way the song goes. I'm like, then you do it. I'd be like, you fucking do it. So I'd just give him the bass, and then he'd do it, and he's always out of time, but at least he could play the part, And no, half the time he would say, look, it's just this. Like, I remember there was one song in particular, I could not get it. It was just out of my rhythm comfort zone. And he goes, no, it's not. You're not going on the downbeat. You're going on the and. And I'm like, oh, I get it now. Of course, now that's not a problem. But back then, because it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, so I'm like, oh, it's and 1. Okay, I got it. I just couldn't hear it, So yeah, no, but he would definitely, like, he never said nothing to me unless he wanted something really, really specific. And for Pete, like, a lot of the guitar stuff, and especially in Samhain, was really important. So you had to be playing those 2 spooky notes at that particular spot, whatever, and doing it like this. So yeah, but this stuff was so cool anyway. Nobody really ever said, oh, it sucks. Let's try it like this. Because we all thought it was great. We were just like, oh, cool. Another new song, It's like, oh, this song's great. This is a great band. What a cool band we are, stuff like that.
Now, what was the reaction of Misfits fans to Samhain?
Yeah. Half of them got up and left, That was it. I remember the first show, people just kept screaming for Misfits songs and like telling us to play faster. And after that show, word got around, people got, the record. They're like, this ain't the Misfits. And other people were like, oh, no, I like it. It's different. It's dark. And then other people like, was like, just latched on. So yeah, you'll always lose half your fans, but then hopefully you gain twice as many of the new crowd. But yeah, they didn't like us so much,
Okay.
But they still we still had the image. It was basically the same thing, because Glenn and I agreed on so much stuff that we were going to basically have the same attitude about music and about the T-shirts and the artwork and and how, the right way to treat your fans and be good to your people and all that shit, So it wasn't really that much of a change. It was just a change in the music, and you could hear Glenn a little bit better, you know, and you know, stuff like that. Songs weren't all like the same speed, you know.
I heard this story. Let me know if this is true or not, or your recollection. The band was about to go on tour, and they needed records to sell, and you guys went to a record pressing plant in Long Island, I believe, and it was closed, but they found the owner somehow, and even though there was no staff, they all went in there, turned the machines on, and pressed the records. Well, all right, everyone, we're going to leave it right there for the moment. Part 2 of this interview will be ready shortly, so make sure you hit the subscribe or follow button on your podcast app for the Vinyl Guide podcast so you'll know immediately when episode 287 is ready. Or if you can't wait for it, well, the whole thing is up at patreon.com/vinylguide. You can join us up there and be enjoying it right now. Otherwise, part 2 will be ready shortly. Thanks for listening. Cheers.